We live. Good evening. Welcome to the Niskayuna Zoning Board of Appeals, our September meeting. Mr. Shiketti, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lataif?
Here.
Mr. Dolman?
Here.
Mr. Gentile?
Here.
Mr. Daly?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Here.
Chairperson Hoke?
Here. First matter on the agenda this evening is a review of the August meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on those minutes?
Make a motion, we accept them.
Well, first, is there any discussion? Having heard no discussion, Mr. Daly?
Make a motion to accept them
A mo-
as read.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded to accept the meeting minutes from August 21st, 2024. Mr. Shiketti, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lataif?
Yes.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Abstain.
Mr. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Yes.
Chairperson Hoke?
Yes, the meeting minutes have been approved. Will you call the first matter on the agenda for this evening, Mr. Shiketti?
Appeal by Dart Strayer for a variance from Section 220-18B3B and Section 220-13 Schedule IB of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskayuna as it applies to the property at 921 Morgan Ave, Niskayuna, New York, located in the R1 low-density residential zoning district, to construct a 10-foot by 16-foot shed partially within the rear yard setback. Section 220-18B3B states that the required side and rear yard dimensions for major accessory structures shall be the same as applies to the principal building. Major accessory structures are defined as detached accessory buildings or other structures in excess of 120 square feet. The shed at 160 square feet is a major accessory structure. Section 220-13 Schedule IB requires a 25-foot rear yard setback. As proposed, the shed would be 10 feet from the rear property line. Therefore, a 15-foot rear yard setback variance is required. 7 notices were mailed, 0 responses.
Sir, will you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Dart Strayer. I live at 921 Morgan Avenue in Niskayuna. I'd also like to disclose that I am the chair of the Conservation Advisory Committee as well as the chair of the Comprehensive Planning Committee, and I have filed a non-disclosure agreement with the Planning Department, and it will be on file.
Thank you. We have received that. You can go forward with your application.
Okay,
Before you-
Laura, could you put the map of the property on there? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes walking through the parcel and explain that we looked at several alternatives and why we chose the location.
Need a mic?
So if you look at this place here, and I apologize for the map because I took it off a blueprint and it was faded. There's the house there. Morgan Avenue is right here. The parcel has several old growth trees. In fact, this pine tree here is about 34 inches in diameter. And it's part of the main features of the whole entire area. There is a sloped area this way, and this is a fairly moderate slope. And then for the property in the rear and this neighbor here, there is a natural water flow that comes through when it rains. This area here is a little damp, and there is a drain. And that drain is part of a much larger drainage system that goes all the way back through the property from behind and also actually out to Route 7. So there's a storm drain there and there's a river that runs through there. So when I looked to place the shed, there were a couple of objectives here. One is we wanted to save all the old growth trees and not cut any of them down. This moderate slope right here, even if we were to cut the trees down, would require us to build the foundation up of the shed, and it would promenade fairly large, high up, probably several feet. This particular part of the parcel here is the lowest part of the parcel. We are meeting the sidelines here, and we're asking for relief in this back area here, primarily because the drainage goes down this way through the property, and this area is wet. If we were to move the shed closer or further away from the rear line, we would end up blocking that water flow area between our neighbor at the back and our property, and we would have to do a lot of additional work to resolve that. This drainage system, the pipe comes down from this part here, it runs the property line, and then actually goes off into a Niskuna storm drain. So when we look at the particular shed location, the gradual slope on the northwest side of the property makes sense for it. This particular location does not require us to cut down any of the low high growth trees or the old growth trees, and it avoids the natural water course through the property. Yeah, I thought I turned this one off. So as far as the impact on the neighboring properties, we meet the requirements on both sides of the property. The only property that we don't is the property in the back. That is a landlocked wooded lot. It's approximately 2 acres, which we currently own. And the nearest neighbor behind that is about 200 feet. That's the least amount of distance of a treed lot. It's completely invisible from everybody. The other thing is we chose the orientation of the shed. It's 16 by 10. The 10-foot visual input or visual footprint that would be viewed from that back property would be the same as a 10 by 12. And if we had a 10 by 12 shed, we'd be putting it, well, we could put it 5 feet from the property line. So from the visual escape from the back property is less than it would be if we used a smaller shed. As far as the neighborhood is a older neighborhood, and there's a mix of housing on that neighborhood. There's a mix of lot sizes. There are detached garage, there are attached garage. So putting this shed in a location where we've located it would be equivalent to neighbors' garages. So it will not look out of place. Because the neighborhood was developed prior to the zoning code, there are a lot of non-conforming, there are buildings that don't conform to the current zoning. For example, my neighbor's garage is 5 feet from my property line, and my garage is 15 feet from my neighbor's property line. The zoning there would require 20 feet. By putting the shed in this particular location, it's the lowest part of the property. So as far as the visual impact to the neighbors, it will be less than if it was on the high side. And if you look at the surrounding neighborhood, a lot of the neighbors do have sheds, existing sheds right now. So it's going to fit in. And actually in the property behind the landlocked, there's actually a barn that sits back there as well. One of the things that's really important for us is to maintain the character of the neighborhood. That's why we purchased a house in this particular neighborhood. We've done a lot of work to preserve the quality of the house in a traditional sense. And for a long time, we put off putting a shed back there, primarily because we couldn't find a shed that would fit the character of our house. And I did include a picture, I believe, in your packet. It is chosen to basically, it's like a posted beam type structure. It's all wood, natural wood. And we picked that particular shed because it would fit in what it looked like it was there all along within the house, belonged with the house. The shed will be put on a gravel foundation, so it's not going to be permanent. There's going to be no permanent foundation. And I've talked to all of my neighbors. My neighbors are fine with the shed. I've received no complaints, but I did go and talk to my neighbors. And just for the final question, this hardship is not really self-created. This hardship comes about due to the topology of the property and the existing trees. So I would take any questions you may have about the placement of the shed.
Mr. Strayer, I just have a brief question. You did a good job in explaining all the variables that we have to consider. So I don't think I have too much, but with respect to the shed itself, what's the purpose that you're trying to achieve by having a shed? You haven't had a shed for all these years. Why do you need a shed now?
Primarily because we'd like to use our garage. So will be for lawn equipment, some gardening, partially a gardening shed as well. And that's really the main use of that.
Okay. Is it because you're getting additional stuff, or you just like to use your garage as a
No,
garage?
we would like to use our garage.
Fair enough. And you need the additional, why do you need 160 square feet as opposed to?
Well, our
120
view
square
on
feet?
that is, we like to do a lot of gardening, and we would like an area where we could, put a bench in there and actually, work on pots, planting pots and stuff like that, and just general hobbies and stuff like that, primarily gardening. That would be the only thing. So our idea would be is we put the snow blower and all the other stuff towards the back, and then we would use the front part for yard work and stuff like that.
Fair enough. Are there any other members of the board that have any questions?
I do.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Richard Green. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yep.
I'm just curious, if I were to be one of your neighbors, would I be able to see the shed? Say if I'm on Morgan Avenue facing the house?
No, you would not. And we were very deliberate about that. So what it does is it lines up behind the garage. So actually from the street, the entire shed would be invisible. The
Sam,
house to the north is close enough to us so you wouldn't see it coming down Morgan Avenue, going towards the south. And the shed would be low enough, and actually the neighbor on the other side of me has a detached garage, so you wouldn't see it at all. So there'd be no visual impact on Morgan Avenue.
yep, and just to satisfy my curiosity, what type of trees are we talking about
We're
here?
talking about a bunch of old growth oak trees,
Oak,
which have a diameter, they're probably close to 30 to 36 inch diameter trees. And we have several white pines on the property. Again, they are of the order of 34 inches. Actually, the reason why I know that is we had an arborist just come and trim the trees and make sure that they're in good repair. So they do it by the diameter. And then we have a maple. That's a red maple.
sure. So is your proposal in part based upon your desire not to cut down old growth trees?
Absolutely. One of the things that gives the neighborhood its character is the number of trees in the neighborhood. We feel very important about maintaining the old growth trees. Hence, we don't get a typical tree person to come. We actually pay for arborists to come to take care of our trees.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Gentile?
Was just going to ask, this would be the first accessory structure in addition to the house? Right now, there's no other ones?
We have a fence that. Yeah, I guess on this parcel would be, we do have a fence on part of this other parcel. It's a 2-acre parcel, and we have fenced some areas of it in with a split rail fence.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Having heard no other questions, are there any members of the audience that wish to be heard for or against this application? Having heard none, is there anyone that wishes to make a motion relative to this application?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, we accept the applicant. The presentation that the applicant made was excellent. He detailed everything that you could possibly detail within reason. Morgan Avenue, you're right, there's all kinds of different plots there, all different numbers. So I'm going to make the motion. It's not going to be an environmental impact. It's not going to detrimental anything for the neighborhood. And that's why I make the motion that we accept this applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. A motion's been made. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Having heard none, Ms. Shakely, will you call the roll?
Mr. Latif?
I'm going to vote yes, and I'd like to point out that the applicant has explained the drainage situation on the lot, and also like to add that there's some trees to be saved, and that's why he chose that area. Also, that property seemed to be having some slope in there, so this is the best location for the shed. And this is the area where the lowest of the property and very close to the drainage. So again, that's more fit for that shed in that spot. Also, I'd like to point out that according to the applicant, that this property consistent with the neighborhood, and back in the days, non-conforming, a lot of people have sheds and garages close by. So for all the reasons stated and what I said, I vote yes.
Mr. Dolman?
I am going to vote yes. I find that while there is other opportunities to place the shed in a spot that would not require a variance, that doing so would be disruptive to the old growth trees and possibly to the drainage. I find this is not an undesirable change in the neighborhood. In fact, this addition conforms to the character of the neighborhood, and the applicant has taken pains to maintain the aesthetic character of the neighborhood in his design that he's presented to us. I do find that this absolutely is a substantial variance. A 15-foot setback variance is absolutely substantial. I don't find that there would be an adverse environmental impact. In fact, I wish that all applicants had taken such pains to tell us about the drainage, environmental effects, and environmental effects in their application. So be applauded on taking that into account and explaining it to us. And this is a self-created issue. However, that is not determinative, and on the balance, I vote yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Daly?
Yes, for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Green?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Chairperson Hoke?
Yes, I would just note that I don't believe that the applicant can achieve his goals with respect to placing the shed at any other location on the property that's feasible for the factors that Mr. Dolman laid out in terms of the slope, the wet area on the property, as well as the old growth trees. I also disagree that this is a substantial variance in the context of the size of the property and the neighborhood. But with respect to those two exceptions, I agree with the other members of the board and what they've stated, and I vote yes as well. So your variance is approved 7-0.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, we call the next matter.
Appeal by Rachel Rourke for a variance from section 220-18B2 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property of 1183 Godfrey Lane, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R1 low-density residential zoning district, to maintain a 4-foot by 6-foot hot tub, which exceeds the number of accessory structures allowed. Section 220-18B2 states that there shall not be more than 3 accessory structures on a lot. Currently, the property has a fence, shed, and a replacement pool. As installed, the hot tub will be the 4th accessory structure. Therefore, a variance for 1 additional accessory structure is required. 11 notices were mailed, 0 responses.
The applicant, please go forward.
I don't look like Rachel.
Can you just tell us name and
And
address?
I'm not exactly sure how I follow that gentleman because that was outstanding. My name is Joseph Rourke. I reside at 1183 Godfrey Lane.
That's okay. Do we have the description up there? Mr. Rourke, why don't you just let us know what the other structures are being used for on the property and why you need the fourth accessory structure?
Yeah, so currently we have the backyard fenced in. It's 6 foot tall dog-eared fencing. We have dogs, so we can let them out to run around. We do have a shed that we use for our gardening stuff. We also have a considerable number of perennial beds that we maintain. And we currently have an above-ground pool, looking to replace with a radiant pool, hopefully to get a couple more weeks of swimming in because the walls are insulated and all that good stuff. So we're looking to, and I apologize because I did not see the paperwork. I think it says 4 by 6, but it's actually closer to 6 by 8. It's a 4-person hot tub that we're looking to put in. Nothing that's going to be hardwired. It's actually a 110 with a built-in breaker, but I would need to put some kind of a footing for it to sit on instead of sitting on the ground.
Mr. Rourke, you indicated in the application that there's a medical reason for the need for the hot tub.
My wife has spinal stenosis, I think is what it's called. So her last job, she didn't have an office. She just worked wherever. So everything was in her backpack, laptop, carriers, all that stuff. And I think her L4, L5 is all whacked out at this point. So the doctor definitely said hot tub would help for that. I wouldn't mind it either because I'm not as young as I used to be, and maintaining gardening's is a challenge at this point.
Let me just ask you this with respect to the existing accessory structures that are on the property, are they in good repair?
Yep.
I see from the diagram that the hot tub looks like it's a substantial distance from your property line.
Correct.
Is the hot tub visible to any of your neighbors?
Unless they're looking from the second floor, it wouldn't be. Again, we have 6-foot dog-eared fencing that runs along both sides, so the neighbors really wouldn't see the hot tub.
And have you had any discussions with your neighbors about the fact that you were seeking to place a hot tub in your backyard?
The neighbors on both sides of us, we've definitely talked with them. Our neighbors across the street came across and say, "Hey, by the way, I got this notice about, do you need us to come there and support you?" I'm like, I think we're okay.
So the answer is that none of your neighbors have expressed any concern. Is that correct?
No concerns.
And that would be the neighbor, it looks like the closest neighbor is 46 feet from the hot tub to the edge of your property on the short side there.
Yep.
And that neighbor, you've spoken with that neighbor?
On the other side of me behind.
Okay, you've spoken to all of the rest. Okay, I have
Yeah.
nothing further. Are there any other members of the board that have questions?
Mr. Chairman, point of potential order. If the application is asking to maintain a 4 by 6, and this gentleman has advised us that it's a 6 by 8, I'm wondering if there should be some mechanism so that it's clear exactly what this board may or may not approve.
I mean, if the representative of the applicant's indicating the change, I would say just accept it. The size doesn't matter as to the variance itself. The variance is for a fourth accessory structure, so unless the difference in size factors into the into the board's decision making, then I would just say we can note it for the record, the change.
Thank you, Counselor. May I ask, is it already been installed?
Has it always been?
Has the hot tub already been installed?
No.
All right, very good. Thank you. No further questions from me. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions from the board?
I have one question.
Hold on.
Reading your wife is in for discomfort and for pain relief.
Yeah.
I know something about that. And it does give pain relief. It does. So, and I'm not a doctor, but I got friends of mine that
I'm
have a hot
hopeful.
tub for that one reason.
I'm hopeful. We're in our mid-50s and,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Latif?
Yes, couple questions.
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned you are putting a pool.
Yes, replacing.
In-ground pool?
It's a radiant pool, so it will be subset in. Yeah.
So the hot tub,
Yep.
the drainage, what are you doing about the drainage of the hot tub and et cetera? I know you said the neighbor are okay with you having the hot tub and eventually it's going to be the pool. So what's your plan for the drainage since you're going to have some equipment with water in the back?
Yeah. So we have a retaining wall that was there. So the slope goes to there. Where the pool is now, where the hot tub going in is flat. So I don't know that it would necessarily cause any drainage. I mean, unless it leaked, obviously that would potentially be an issue. But I think my house would be more in danger than theirs if something like that were to happen.
Okay. So at this point, you're assuming that there are going to be no leaks and so on. So if there is, I would just take into consideration some kind of a drainage in case you need to empty it and so on. So I would
Okay.
take that into consideration. My other question for you, you said in the back, do you have a fence and how high is your fence?
So the two sides are 6 foot tall dog-eared wooden fence. The back was a chain link. I think it's 4 feet along the back of the property.
Okay, so back to your hot tub, how high is it going to be from the ground since you have a 6 feet fence? Like, is it on the deck or?
Yeah, I mean, the hot tub's probably maybe 3.5 feet tops.
Okay,
Um,
and then you go down the steps to it, or?
You actually do a couple steps up to get where they sell stools.
So how high is it going to be from the ground? Like
About 3.5 feet.
3.5?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other members of the board that have any questions? Having heard none, is there any members of the audience that wish to be heard for or against this application? Having heard none, is there any member of the board that wishes to make a motion with respect to this application?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Green.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application for a 6x8 hot tub as applied for by this homeowner. Here's the deal. We got a situation where we have a fenced-in property with a hot tub that will be basically centered in the back of the property. The addition of the hot tub, while it is in fact one additional accessory structure, is not such that in my mind it turns the property into a carnival or circus-like. It looks like a hot tub will be appropriately placed. I also note that while perhaps certainly the hot tub could be placed somewhere else, that's really not the issue. The issue is that it's the one additional structure. I don't believe there will be an undesirable change in the neighborhood character. Certainly, I don't see a detriment to any other properties as this has been described to me. Notices presumably have been sent to the neighbors. No one's made any complaints. No one's here tonight, either virtually or in person. The request, substantial or not, whatever. It's substantial enough that a reasonable mind could say it is substantial, but given the other factors, it's not so substantial as to militate this, in my mind, bending to the negative. Will there be adverse physical environmental effects? Not as described to me in response to Mr. Latif's inquiry. and the applicant's representation to take into consideration things to make sure that there are no adverse physical or environmental effects. Is the difficulty self-created again? Sure, it's self-created, but there's really no other way to address the application to install the hot tub, and it's really not determinative. And most importantly, or as importantly as some of the other factors, the reason for the hot tub is to assist the homeowner, one of the homeowners, with assuredly, as represented to us, a difficult medical situation. For all those reasons, I move that this application be granted.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I second, Mr. Chairman.
Who is that?
and
Mr. Lataif has seconded the motion.
I'm just gonna add, for my second of the motion, that we have had before us an extra structure. One of the structures is usually a hot tub. And we have approved those before. And there's more reason to approve this one, especially when there's a medical need for one of the applicants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? I would note for the purposes of this motion that the applicant has represented during his presentation that the hot tub will be 6 feet by 8 feet, which is different from his original application of 4 feet by 6 feet, as represented by council. That doesn't have a direct bearing on the variance request, but I am noting it for the record. That being said, if there's no other discussion, Mr. Teddy, we call the roll, please.
Mr. Lataif?
Yes, for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Daly?
Yes, for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Antonikowski?
Yes.
Chairperson Hoke?
Yes, for the reasons stated. Your variance has been approved 7-0.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Go enjoy.
All right, thanks.
Call the next matter, please.
Appeal by Jeremy Youngs for a variance from Section 220-18B3B and Section 220-13 Schedule IB of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 852 Hereford Way, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R1 Low Density Residential Zoning District, to construct a 10-foot by 16-foot shed partially within the side and rear yard setback. Section 220-18B3B states that the required side and rear yard dimensions for major accessory structure shall be the same as applies to the principal building. Major accessory structures are defined as detached accessory buildings or other structures in excess of 120 square feet. The shed at 160 square feet is a major accessory structure. Section 220-13 Schedule IB requires a 20-foot side yard setback and a 25-foot rear yard setback. As proposed, the shed would be located 5 feet from the side property line and 7 feet from the rear property line. Therefore, both a 15-foot side yard setback variance and an 18-foot rear yard setback variance are required. 10 notices were mailed out, 0 responses.
Sir, will you state your name and address for the record, please?
Jeremy Youngs, 852 Hereford Way, Niskiuna.
So, Mr. Youngs, this looks like a familiar application.
I think there's a sale on 10 by 16 sheds.
Will you, why don't you let us know? I mean, the main question that I have for you, and maybe you want to answer, is why this shed and why here on your property?
Sure. May I got a couple extra pieces of
Sure.
information. I only have 3 though.
You don't need these back, correct?
I don't need them back. I've always put them right down the middle.
Are they the same document?
I took some Google Earth pictures so you could see the trees and stuff between the neighboring properties. All right. So,
Are all 3 sheets of paper the same thing?
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
May we make one of these part of the record?
Sure.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.
I should have brought 8. I apologize. So the purpose of the shed is for storage, lawnmower, snow blower, Sort of self-inflicted. I have 5 children, so they're all school age now, and I've accumulated bicycles and sports gear and stuff. The reason I chose that spot is because I have a bigger front yard than backyard, and it would be quite unsightly to put it in the front yard. And I do have a large pine and a red maple in the front, so I wasn't really interested in changing the front of the lot. In the back, I have a deck that was permitted a couple years ago, so if I moved it into that back corner, I printed out the pictures because that back corner is all like little Christmas trees and shrubbery like that kind of acts as a kind of a boundary between me and my backyard neighbors. So that location is right at the top of my driveway, so it's almost a natural extension. I also would like to get my gasoline products out of my garage. A friend of mine just this summer on River Road had a fire in his garage, and it was caused by working on his car, and he had gas cans in there. So I only have the lawnmower, a leaf blower, and a snow blower, but that'll at least get a couple cans of gasoline out of my main garage. And then the neighborhood, there's about 24 kids in our neighborhood. All the houses are end of late 1950s, early 1960s. And I'll be able to put a lot of the stuff away that's in my garage now into the shed. So there's some safety benefits there. And from a visual point of view, I do have kids' toys, wheelbarrows sitting in that back corner right now. So it is a little unsightly. The only neighbor that can see is my sister-in-law that's to the right up here. But so that's not a big deal there. But I have overhead storage in my garage now, but I can't get some of the summer toys and bicycles and stuff into that overhead storage in my garage. So, and I do have 2 of my vehicles parked in my driveway at all times. So like the gentleman before, I'd like to have some inside storage for my vehicles and actually use the garage.
So, with respect to your sister-in-law, have you discussed your application?
Yes, I have.
Has she voiced any opposition?
No.
How about any other neighbors?
I've spoke with all my neighbors. They did kind of joke about the letters they got, and I have support from all of them.
And when you say you spoke to all of them, who is all of them?
So there's 4 neighboring properties here. I've talked to the 4 of them, and I'm very close with the 3 right directly across the street, because you would be able to see it from a couple houses that are on the other side. So I made sure to check with them as well.
Why would it not be feasible to move your shed farther into your property to avoid the need for the side yard setback?
Further in, because at that point I'd have to take down some of those trees that you can see there. If I don't take down the trees, the shed's going to be within probably 15 feet of my house, or maybe 10 feet of the deck, and then I'm losing most of my backyard.
Are there any other questions for members of the board?
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire of this applicant to share with us on the record what the proposed shed is going to look like, what it's made of, and other such things, including the height of the shed?
Sure. So 2x4 construction. So this is coming from Classic Shed and Patio. So different than the Lowe's brands. They made more out of like stick lumber, 2x3s, or maybe 1x2s. So this made 2x4 construction. The architectural shingles for the roof, and the 2 options for the siding were kind of a a board and batten. It's like a texture 111 it used to be, but it's the modern kind. But we're going to choose vinyl siding to match the house. There are probably 3 or 4 other sheds in the neighborhood, and they all have vinyl siding that is at least similar to the design of their own homes. So I'm going to go with vinyl siding.
Great. What's the height for the record?
Okay, so there is a loft on the inside. So the peak is 2 feet taller than the door, so it will be 9 feet tall at the peak.
And what is this proposed shed going to rest upon?
Crusher run gravel. So on the I think the last page I included that because the back side of that property is not flat, so it's going to take about 4 yards of gravel to put in there and to be tamped down.
All right, and if I may, one of the purposes, as I understand you're telling us, is should this variance be granted and should you have this shed, this will help you consolidate bicycles, outside toys from being piled up in the yard.
Yes.
All right.
I'm not saying it's terrible right now, but it's going to provide me extra storage.
Right. And
I
you
also hope to put in my garbage cans in there. So that's really one of the main reasons for the extra 4 feet of length, is because I don't have a fence. I don't have any other structures on the property. So my garbage cans are just sitting at the top of my driveway right now. So this will enable me. I have a double door plan there, so it'll enable me to stick them in around the corner.
and you'll be able to fit the 5 bicycles inside the shed also?
So the taller, I'm going for the taller one, so it'll include that loft. It probably won't fit 5. I would have to be much bigger, I think, for that, but I do have space for 3 in my 2-stall garage.
All right, and you mentioned that in part this application is self-created because of the size of your family. Just for the record, that's a blessing in my mind and not an imposition.
I can't blame it on anyone else except for me, I guess, and my wife.
All right, very good, thank you.
Are there any other members of the board that have any questions?
I've just got just one question. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Youngs. Are you going to be removing any trees or foliage to put the shed in?
I have to trim about 3 feet up on a pine tree that I have in the back, which will be useful for that tree because it's a little overgrown and those branches are overgrown and dying anyways.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm going to slide that back in between existing trees.
Okay, so it's mostly an open space that's available right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Any plans to trim any foliage between the shed and the adjacent property?
I should have brought more pictures. There's only a few. I want to say they've got their green acorns, green walnuts. There's only a few small trees there right now, so there's no need for any pruning there.
Okay. And are you going to have any drainage on the shed?
So the reason all that foliage is there on the map is because there is drainage between the houses. Hereford Way's in the front. In the back, there is already a drain line, so that's very wet right now, and that goes down and runs between the houses. So that, I mean, I'm not going to set up water or anything. So even in a heavy rainfall or anything, my backyard will naturally slope to the drainage.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the board? Having heard none, are there any members of the audience that wish to be heard for or against the application? I thought this was going to be the one, but no members of the audience. Having heard none, does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to this application?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve the application as written. I find that this, as far as the benefit being able to achieve by other means, this does appear to be the best place on the property based on the unique layout of the property with respect to decking, the driveway, and foliage. I do not find that this is an undesirable change in the neighborhood, as there are several sheds in the neighborhood already. And unique layout of his sister-in-law's property as well. Also gives a little bit of breathing room there. I do find that this is substantial, adding a significant setback here. And then as far as adverse environmental impact, it appears that drainage has been considered, so I don't find that there's going to be anything there. This is absolutely self-created, but that is not determinative. So on the balance, I would move to approve the application as written.
Thank you, Mr. Dolman. A motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, for all the reasons stated.
A motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Having heard none, Ms. Shakedi, will you call the roll? Oh, just with respect to the motion, I'm sorry. With respect to the motion, Mr. Dolman, were you making a motion for one variance or both variances?
Apologize for both.
And Mr. Daly, were you seconding it for
I'll second it
both variances?
for both variants.
Okay. A motion's been made and seconded. There's no discussion on the motion. Ms. Shakedi, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lateif,
I'm going to vote yes for reasons stated.
Mr. Dolman,
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Gentile,
Yes, it's a relatively small backyard, made smaller by the number of people depending on it. So I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Daly,
Yes, for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Green,
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Antonikowski,
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Chairperson Hoke.
Yes, I'll just note for the record that the applicants indicated that this is going to have a positive impact on the character of the neighborhood by virtue of him being able to clean up his property a little bit. Not that he indicated that it was in disrepair, but he did indicate that it would remove some clutter. So I appreciate that. So yes, your variance has been approved 7-0.
Thank you.
Very good presentation.
Thank you. Anything else tonight?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, thank you.
If there's no further matters before the board, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.